Welcome everyone to Diabetes Canada's 2017 webinar series. My name is Farah Ismail and I will be your host for today. We are delighted that you're able to join us today for the webinar to learn about making the most of your food dollar. Now to start off, I would like to draw your attention to our survey, which is located at the top right-hand section of your screen. In order to better serve your needs, we kindly ask you provide us with your input by completing the short survey towards the end of our presentation, and we thank you in advance for your input. Now, throughout today's presentation, you will have the opportunity to ask questions, and this can be done by simply typing in the question and answer box, which is located to the bottom right-hand section of your screen. And our presenter will be happy to respond to these towards the end of the presentation. As well, we will be displaying a few polling questions throughout the presentation and would love for your participation. Please note that your answers will remain completely anonymous. Also note that you are able to customize your screens. You can expand and collapse each of the webinar pods as you see fit by simply dragging down each of the webinar pods on the bottom right-hand corner. Our presentation today will be about 35 to 40 minutes in length, and we'll have about 10 to 15 minutes at the end for questions. Our presentation is being recorded and will be made available on our Diabetes Canada website and our Diabetes Canada YouTube channel in the coming weeks. Our webinar on healthy living has been proudly supported by Weight Watchers Canada. Diabetes Canada recognizes the Weight Watchers Beyond the Scale program as an effective way to lose weight through healthy eating and physical activity. Now I'd like to welcome our speaker, Jacqueline Humphrey, and thank her for joining us today. But before turning it over to Jacqueline, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Jacqueline is a wellness facilitator and registered dietitian with the Nova Scotia Health Authority. She has worked in a variety of settings over the past 20 years, including private practice, research, inpatient and outpatient clinical nutrition, and cardiac rehab. Jacqueline has been working with community health teams since they began in 2010 and has a special interest in supporting behavior change. For more information on Jacqueline, please read the speaker bio section, which is located to the left of your screen. So without further ado, I present to you Jacqueline Humphrey.
Thanks so much, Farah, and I really appreciate the opportunity to talk to everybody about this topic, making the most of your food dollar. So I'm going to spend about 45 minutes, I'm thinking, with you. It may go a little bit quicker since I don't have people asking me questions in live time to get through the information, but I will do my best. So the objectives of our time together are to get everybody thinking about eating as healthy as you can personally. And we're going to break that down into three different areas: making the most of your food dollar at the grocery store, making the most of your food dollar at your home, and also making the most of your food dollar in your local communities. Keeping in mind that I'm from Nova Scotia, so some of the examples that I will speak to would be relevant to Nova Scotia, where I live. And then at the end, as Farah said, we'll wrap things up with hopefully some good questions. So my hope for everybody by the end of our time together is that you will be able to do the following. First off, explain the importance of knowing the store that you do your shopping in. Secondly, to be able to use unit pricing to compare what is the best buy between more than one item. Be able to explain what is the most cost-effective way to use coupons, and also to be able to list at least one cost-saving tip that you could use when you're purchasing food from each of the 4 food groups. So I'm hoping that's what folks were interested in, and there's nothing too alarming about the content, and this is what you've signed up for. So without further ado, I'm going to give you some information on how we tend to orientate or set up our programs with the community health team, which is where I work in Nova Scotia. So what I would like everybody to begin to think about before we launch into the information portion of the workshop is to ask yourself a few questions. The first one is, are you participating in this webinar because you want to actually spend less money on food? So hopefully that's why you are indeed participating. And what I would encourage you to begin to think about as we work through the information is to start thinking about what are those actions or what are those behaviors that you could adopt yourself to allow you to spend less money on food. All too often what happens is we come to workshops, we listen to the information, but without making it meaningful and personal to ourselves, it likely won't translate into change. So what I mean by an action or a behavior is something that you can see or hear. And if you notice on your screen, you'll see a little boy there with a video camera and a megaphone. And the reason why that's there is whatever action or behavior you're thinking about doing, I should or somebody in your house should be able to capture that on a video. So if we're thinking about, what some potential behaviors might be for a session called making the most of your food dollar, or some behaviors that might allow you to spend less money on food, it might be things like making a grocery list. So if I were to take a picture or a video camera, I would actually be able to see you writing out a grocery list. It could be something like checking unit pricing. One of the things that we're going to talk about this afternoon is how to compare the prices of products by using unit pricing. Another example of a behavior for this session might also be, comparing flyers or even looking at the flyers. So as you can see from the three examples that I just shared with you, those are all examples of an action or a behavior that I could or somebody else could adopt to allow them to hopefully spend less money on food. So again, my challenge for you as we begin to work through this is to see if you can jot down or begin to really identify some behaviors that you might be able to adopt to allow you to spend less money on food. The second piece to this behavior or action that I would challenge everybody to think about as well is to do a check-in with yourself to see how ready you are to make a change in a certain area. And what I like to use here at the Community Health Team, or what we like to use as an example or an analogy, would be a traffic light. So we would encourage everybody, again, to ask themselves some meaningful questions. And for anybody who is interested, there is a handout that is available that does have these 4 questions on it. So the first question is, do you consider whatever action it is to be a problem? So I'm just going to use the example of making a grocery list. So it could be, do you consider the fact that you don't make a grocery list to be a problem? And then what you want to do is you want to delve a little bit deeper and you want to ask the next question. You want to ask yourself, are you bothered by the fact that you don't make a grocery list? Then you want to go a little bit deeper again and ask yourself, are you interested in changing the fact that you don't want to make or that you don't make a grocery list? And then finally, you want to ask yourself, are you ready to change that, or are you ready to make a grocery list now? Now you'll notice that it doesn't say next week or after summer vacation. It's, are you ready to actually do this now? And then depending upon how you answer those 4 questions, you can slot yourself into one of 3 categories. If you're saying no to all 4 questions, for whatever behavior it is that we're talking about, think of that behavior, think of that action as just information. and we would code you as red light with regards to changing that behavior. So if you don't consider the fact that you don't make a grocery list to be a problem, you're not bothered by it, you're not interested in changing it, you're not ready to change it now, I would code you as red light. See if you can find something that you might be more successful with regards to change. If you have some yeses and nos, so imagine that you consider the fact that you don't make a grocery list to be a problem, you're bothered by it, but you're kind of saying, oh, I'm not sure, Jacqueline, if I'm actually interested in changing it, and oh, I really don't think I could do it now. We would code you as yellow light, proceed with caution. Keep in mind that if you do try to make this change, chances are you might struggle with that change. Ideally, what you want to do as we work through the information this afternoon is to see if you can identify those behaviors that you can say yes to all 4 questions. What we know about change is that it's human nature for most of us to tackle the hardest things first. And from a behavior change standpoint, the best thing that we can do is to resist the temptation of changing the hardest things first and focus on those things that we can say yes to all 4 questions. So hopefully that gives you a bit of an idea of the kind of mindset that I would like everybody to kind of get as we work through the information. So we have our first polling question before we launch into the information. And as you can see on your slide, it says, what is the best way to stick to your budget? And I'm going to give everybody a few minutes to log in your response, buy everything that's on sale, buy food already prepared, go hungry to the store, or make a list of the items that you need. And I'll try not to go too fast and give everybody an opportunity to answer that. So it looks like nobody needs this session here. Well done, everybody. As you can see, based on the poll, the correct response is actually D. Make a list of the items that you need. And if you notice on the poll, there were some folks that did select buy everything that's on sale. That's certainly true to a degree, but I would challenge everybody to not buy it unless you actually need whatever it is. So yes, it's important to buy things that are on sale, but if you don't need it, then in the long run, it's not going to save you money. So setting the stage, I'm sure nobody here who's listening this afternoon is surprised to know that healthy eating can be expensive. What we know here in Nova Scotia is that it is impossible for some people to eat healthy based on the amount of money that it is that they have allotted for food, and we know that that's not at all different throughout the country. So really, the focus this afternoon is all about eating as healthy as you can, given the budget that you have. So we know that some people, you might have a lot of money to spend on food. There's likely other folks listening who perhaps have less money to spend on food. And again, my hope is that you'll take the information that is pertinent and relevant to you as we work through the information. That being said, in keeping with the theme of eating as healthy as you can, remember, from a diabetes standpoint, the whole idea is to plan for that balance. And, in planning for that balance at your meals, try to make sure that you're having at least 3 food groups represented at your meals. At your snacks, make sure you're having at least 2 food groups. And always in the back of your mind, think about that plate. that you see up on your slide. Quarter of your plate protein, a quarter of your plate a starchy food, and at least half of your plate filled with vegetables. And in keeping with that idea of balance, what we're going to begin to do is to talk about how can we make the most of our food dollar at the grocery store. So at the grocery store, what we've heard from, or what I've heard in my years working as a dietitian, that sometimes what happens is people will get to the end of a month and they'll realize, oh my gosh, I don't have enough money to buy what it is that I wanted to buy now. Or by the end of the month, we don't have any fresh fruits or vegetables on hand. Other things that I've heard from people over the years is that, boy, oh boy, Jacqueline, it's really, really hard to plan for a whole month. And recognizing that all of those things are reality for some people. So some strategies that I've heard over the years are, taking advantage of some of the rewards programs that are available. Does your grocery store have some type of a rewards program? Is there a rewards program at your local pharmacy? Because oftentimes we can get groceries at our pharmacy as well. And probably the most clever idea that I've ever heard of was I had one person, what they did was they kind of did an inventory to see how much money they normally spent on food, because what I've heard over the years is that most people are not actually aware of how much money they are spending. So step one might be do a bit of an evaluation on yourself and see how much money do you normally spend on food. And then what this person did was they would buy grocery gift cards or food gift cards for at least half of that amount, because what that would allow them to do is it would lock in that money so that they wouldn't spend it on something else. So I thought for the person that perhaps gets to the end of the month and something comes up and they have to use that money for that was originally allotted for food for something else, it's a great way to make sure that you still do have some funds by the end of the month to get what you need at your store. So we're going to start with the food group best buys. So in keeping with that whole idea of balance, we're going to start with Canada's Food Guide and start with our fruits and vegetables food group for a minute. And a common question that pops up, and as you can see based on your slide here, you'll see I've got fresh peas, I have frozen peas, and I have canned peas on here. So, what is better for us from a nutrition standpoint, from a cost-saving standpoint? What we know is that fresh, frozen, and canned vegetables and fruits can all be good for us. The important thing to remember with vegetables and fruit is actually making sure that we are eating some. We know that canned vegetables typically are going to have more salt. Canned fruit is typically going to have more sugar. So depending upon what your goals are, you may want to have less of those, or you may want to give them a good rinse off before you buy them. But really, in terms of what is better is what you actually like and you're actually going to eat. Now, the other thing to consider with regards to vegetables and fruits also is, do you waste vegetables and fruit? I know many people have wonderful intentions, and we're of the mindset that fresh may be the way to go. And perhaps we go to the grocery store and we buy fresh carrots, and we buy fresh peas, and we buy some fresh cantaloupe, and we buy some strawberries, and we buy some oranges, and we buy some apples, and then we stick it in our refrigerator, and we put it where? In the generally the most inconvenient place to see, in our fridge. So we take all of those wonderful vegetables and fruits, and we hide them in the crisper in the bottom of our fridge. And then, lo and behold, what happens is generally a week later or 2 weeks later, we open up that nasty drawer and we see the cucumber has gone bad, the broccoli has gone bad, and all of these wonderful, nutritious, fresh fruits and vegetables that we bought are rotten in our refrigerator. If you're somebody who has that kind of a pattern, for you it may actually make more sense to buy frozen. Frozen, generally what happens is the manufacturers would take the best of the best, they quick freeze them, which locks the nutrients in there, and then you can take out what you need when you need it and put the rest in the freezer. So when it comes to fruits and vegetables, or vegetables and fruit, a good recommendation is to, again, do a bit of an evaluation of what are your usual practices. Do you have enough? Do you end up wasting a lot? And if you're somebody who does waste a lot, maybe you need to consider either buying less or maybe buying some frozen. The other thing that may, on the surface, seem more cost than what it actually is when it comes to fruits and vegetables is taking the time to actually buy a vegetable tray or a fruit tray. And again, I know it sounds like a lot of money up front, but again, if you think about your spending practices, if you're somebody who has a lot of waste, generally when we buy a fruit and veggie tray, we can't fit it in the crisper, so it has to go on the main shelf of our fridge, and we actually see it every time we open up that fridge, and we tend to use it. So again, with the vegetables and fruit, it's really important to be aware of what you like and what you're currently wasting. Moving on to the next food group, our grain products. What we know about grain products is that oftentimes buying things in bulk can be more cost effective. Checking out day-old breads, day-old bagels, freeze them as foods are getting to the end of their life expectancy. Buying larger quantities of things when they're on sale. But again, the important piece with your grain products is to make sure you use things up before they go stale. So if you are buying cereal in bulk, what you'd want to make sure you do, as you see in the slide here, make sure that you're storing things in airtight containers. What we know about cereal is that generally hot cereals cost less and they last longer than your cold cereals. So things like your rolled oats in the long run are more cost effective. Taking advantage of weekly sales on cereals, looking at those buy one, get one free, buying family size boxes can sometimes be an option. And we'll talk a little more about how do you know which is the most cost effective in a few minutes. So again, when it comes to your grain products, again, it's most important to be aware of what is it that you buy most often, and is there an opportunity to buy no name versus brand name? And again, when we talk about unit pricing, I'll explain that in a little more detail. With the grain products, one thing that I didn't mention from a diabetes standpoint, again, you'd want to make sure you're choosing whole grains most often. Moving on to our milk and milk alternates food group. As you can see on the slide, I have a variety of things up here, but one of the most common questions that I get asked as a dietitian is, Should I be buying my milk in 4-liter containers, 2-liter containers, 1-liter containers? What is the most cost effective? What we know from a nutrition standpoint, they're all the same. You know, you want to ask yourself, are there any on sale? Sometimes it is more cost effective to buy the larger. Sometimes it's more cost effective to buy the smaller. It generally does depend. Milk that is stored in bags can be frozen. You can freeze it in a carton, but it's going to expand a little bit and be a little more challenging to give a shake to after the fact. Generally, last time I went to the grocery store and did some costing of milk, a 4-liter package of milk costs about 31 cents per cup. If we look at a 1-liter or a 2-liter container of milk, it costs about 50 cents per cup. So there is generally a cost differential once you buy the 4 liters. Between the 1 and the 2 liters, generally it doesn't make much difference at all. The most inexpensive way to purchase our milk is skim milk powder. The challenge with skim milk powder is that there's many people who grew up drinking powdered milk, so sometimes we have a negative reaction when we think about powdered milk. So again, what I've found works really well with this is a lot of people I know, what they'll do is they will buy some powdered milk and they will use it for cooking or baking and save the more costly fluid milk for the actual drinking. Again, when it comes to your milk and alternatives, one thing to look at is the unit pricing as well, which we'll talk about in just a few more slides. That will allow us to compare, does a brand name versus a no name, which is more cost effective. Lastly, our final food group, as you can see on your slide, is the meat and alternatives food group. Our food group that we traditionally think of as our protein foods. And you can see on your slide here, there's a variety of examples of foods that fit into this food group. Oftentimes we forget about eggs. Eggs are a great source of protein and a relatively inexpensive protein food to have on hand. This is where our canned beans, our dried peas, beans, lentils can come into play. Buying a whole chicken as opposed to chicken pieces. Having some canned fish can also fit in nicely here. And then we also have our fresh meat as well. You'll notice on the left-hand side of your screen, there is a product there, and I'm hoping everybody can see it. It's called TVP, or Textured Vegetable Protein. And this might be something that you've never heard of before. It's a soy-based protein, and one package of TVP costs about $3.50 last I looked. And you only generally need about a 41 cents worth is comparable to a 3-ounce serving of meat, chicken, or fish. So it's really a very nice cost-effective way to stretch your food dollar. Now the places where you can use this TVP, or textured vegetable protein, is essentially any place where you would normally use ground beef. And again, the handout that I referred to, there is a recipe on your handout for a low-cost meatless Mexican chili. So with this TVP, it's a dried, almost like a rolled oat dried product. It is soy-based, and you can use it one of two ways. The first place that you can use this is any liquid that you have. So for instance, let's say you're making spaghetti sauce or you're making chili. What you can do is you can take a handful of this TVP and just throw it into your spaghetti sauce or into your chili sauce. And what it does is it's going to take on the taste and the flavor and rehydrate. And if you've ever had a vegetarian chili and you've thought there was ground beef in it, there may have actually been TVP in it. So if you're adding it to a liquid, you don't have to rehydrate it. The other place where you can use your TVP is you can rehydrate TVP. Any place you buy, you can get it at most grocery stores in generally the health food section, or you can also get it at bulk barns as well. And in the package that you buy, there's generally directions on it. What you do is you use equal amounts of TVP in the dry form and boil your kettle and add the same amount of water. Pour the water on it. Let the water absorb into the TVP. And then what you can do is you can use it to mix together with your ground beef and make hamburger patties. You can make meatloaf with it. You could make meatballs with it. Generally speaking, for the first time, I would suggest if you're adding it to a hamburger or a ground beef or a ground pork, what you'd want to do is you'd want to use equal amounts of TVP and your ground product and see if you like the taste of it. So I've used this in lasagnas. I've used it in hamburger patties. I've even cooked hamburgers on the barbecue, half TVP, half ground beef, or in meatballs as well. So it's really a nice way to use half of the ground beef that you would normally use. The other great thing about it is doesn't have any fat. So from a cardiovascular or heart health standpoint, it's actually really good for us as well. So I would encourage you to think about, is there a role for TVP in your household? It's one of those rare finds that over my years experience working as a dietitian, it's the only product that I've ever recommended that I've not had somebody, at least one person, come back and say, oh, that was really horrible, Jacqueline. The response I generally get is, oh my gosh, I can't believe how good that TVP is. I had nobody in my house knew that it wasn't 100% meat. So you might want to give that a try. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a sense of, thinking about what could you do in choosing foods from the 4 food groups to allow you to save some money. So we're going to move to the grocery store, and what we know about food is it used to be really easy. Years ago, we had big department grocery stores, big supermarkets that we could go to, and we might have had 1, maybe 2, maybe 3 in our community. So it wasn't hard to know where to go to get our groceries. Now, I would say that's changed dramatically. We have lots of other places that sell food. We have our bulk barns, we have our Giant Tigers, we have Walmarts, we have Costco's, we have dollar stores, we have our pharmacies. The multitude of stores that we can go to is vast. And what I've found over the years is that this lends to a lot of confusion for a lot of us. So depending upon how close together these places are, for some people what they're doing is they're going from store 1 to store 2 to store 3 to store 4, and they're spending lots of money on either public transportation, on gasoline, time, effort, you name it. So you need to begin to ask yourself, does it make sense to be going all over the place to buy my groceries, or do I really need to get a good sense of where's the best place to, or the most cost-effective place to buy my groceries. So again, it goes back to that whole notion of being aware of what it is that you buy often and what is the usual price of things. So I'm going to share a little story about a lady that I encountered probably about 5 years ago, and I'll describe her as my lady with the little black book. And this lady with the little black book, she was probably the most frugal shopper when it came to food that I had ever encountered. And what she did was she knew that, and most of us are no different, there's probably a list of 20, maybe 25 things that we buy individually, each of us, on a regular basis. You know, it's our milk, it's our bread, it's our cheese, you know, maybe it's cereal, our margarines. Think about those things that you buy regularly. And what this lady did was she had this little book. She was not a fan of electronics, so she didn't want it in her smartphone or anything like that. She went to the dollar store and she got her little black book. And she had in her little black book the regular price of all of those things that she bought on a regular basis. So that what that did was that allowed her to be aware of what her usual price was for those things that she would buy most often. So if we go back to all of those places where you can buy groceries, she would perhaps say, well, you know what, I'm at Walmart today, and milk is on for $3.57. Well, gee, if you're like me, I can't remember from one day or to the next the prices of 25 different things. So what she would do is she would open up her little black book and she would say, oh, I normally pay this for my milk. And that would give her an idea of whether or not it actually made sense for her to purchase that item on that given day when she was in that store. So, you know, it is really important to know your local food stores. Know, is there a pattern to your sales? You know, also ask yourself, if things are being marked down, can you do something with the food that is there? So, for instance, if there are vegetables and fruits in your grocery store that are being marked down because they're at the end of their life expectancy, it may be great to buy them if you're going to use them that day. If you know that you can't use them for another 3 or 4 days and you're only going to throw them into your composter, perhaps it doesn't make sense for you to purchase that. So again, begin to become aware, are there patterns? What you'll likely find when you start to pay attention is that there are many patterns to sales. Again, here in Nova Scotia, you generally never have to buy cheese at full price. Cheese goes on sale at least once a month in all of our major grocery stores. So as long as you know when that pattern is, you can take advantage of when to buy it. I had also mentioned eggs. Same is true with eggs. Same is true with cereals. So again, see if you can begin to dial into those patterns of those things that you buy often. If you're wondering in your grocery store, the other thing that you can always do is you can ask your store manager if they're willing to share ahead of time with you any sales that are up and coming. The other thing that you can do at your grocery store, and again, my lady with the little black book, she was a master of this. What she would do when she was at the grocery store is anything that was identified as on sale, she would mark the sale price in her little book. And that way, when she got up to her cash register, she would make sure that the prices were rung in correctly. I'm not sure if everybody's aware or not, but oftentimes earlier into sales, prices can be coded wrong, and you may be charged more for something. If that's the case, what you can do is let them be aware of that, and you can get the item for free up to $10. So be aware of what's in your what things are being rung in as. So our next polling question is up on the slide. What is the correct way to use coupons? And again, I'll give everybody a couple of minutes to dial into that one. And we'll see if I've given you a long enough time. Again, you guys are brilliant. As you can see from the responses, using coupons only for items that you use. Again, it's important to remember that a coupon's only useful if you're going to consume the product. So oftentimes we might use coupons for things that we have never tried before, and we might try it and say, oh yeah, that's horrible, and then that ends up being a waste. I can see on the poll, 24% of you said use coupons to guide your shopping list. That's kind of right as well. But make sure that those things that you are using coupons for are also things that you would actually eat or purchase. So where do you find coupons? There's a multitude of places where you can find coupons, as I'm sure you're aware. You can get them in grocery stores. There are many online places where you can get coupons as well. Ask yourself, do you actually buy things that you might not need because there is a coupon there? Again, based on our poll, we already learned that that's probably not a great strategy. On your screen there, you'll see some websites where you can print off various coupons. Again, these are available on your handout. And for any of you who have a smartphone, there are some great apps for coupons as well that you may want to consider checking out. So what about rain checks? Have you ever gone to the store to buy something only to find out, oh my gosh, it's not there anymore? One of the most clever strategies that I've heard for rain checks was the following. If you know that there is an item on sale that you'd really like to buy, and perhaps you don't have enough money to spend on that particular food right now, or maybe you don't need it right now, if you go towards the end of a sale, sometimes that item will no longer be in the grocery store, and you can do that strategically, and then get your rain check, and then maybe a week from now, go back to the store when the item is available and you have more money to spend on that particular item. The important thing to remember about rain checks is to make sure that your store honors your rain checks, and to inquire at your store about whether or not there is an expiration date on your rain check. Many do not have expiration dates, but some do. Our third poll, when you are grocery shopping, why should you stick to the outer aisles? See how you do on this one. So far, you guys are doing amazing. Yay, 100%. I knew this was an easy question. You're absolutely right. That's where the healthiest foods are located. I would say a great byproduct of shopping on the perimeter is that it is good exercise as well. It's a good way to get a few laps in, particularly in the winter months or on rainy days. So when it comes to the grocery store, I put this picture here just to remind everybody that whether or not you're aware of this, most of the more expensive items are located at that lovely eye level, because that's what our eyes are drawn to, and that's what we see. So this brings us to the topic of unit pricing, and this is just a standard label that I put up here to give you an idea of how to most effectively compare items from one category to another. So if you're buying cereal, for instance, how do I know what is better, my bulk Cheerios or my smaller box of Cheerios. These are two real-life Cheerio, General Mills Honey Nut Cheerio boxes that were in the grocery store. I took a picture of it. You can see one is $6.79 for a large box. The other one is generally $4.49, but it's on sale for $2.99. How do I know what's a better buy? If you need reading glasses, make sure you bring them to the grocery store. If you don't, you should be fine. But in the bottom row where you see that little circle, what that tells me is that my large bulk box of Cheerios, it's 99 cents for 100 grams. And most of us, 100 grams doesn't mean anything, and it doesn't really have to mean anything to compare one item to the other. Because if you look at my second box, you'll see that this one is 65 cents per 100 grams. As long as the per unit is the same, you're comparing the same amount of that food. So this tells us, in this case, it actually makes more sense to buy the smaller box of Cheerios that's on sale. It's a third of the price of the bulk. Here's another example of unit pricing, and this is an example on a couple of levels. So this is for rolled oats or for oatmeal or hot cereal. You can see the top example is for a no-name large flake oat, and it's $2.47 for my 1,000-gram package. If you look at the bottom example, it's a instant oatmeal, maple and brown sugar. It's $3.59 for my box. Well, what's the better bang for my buck? Again, if you go and look at your unit pricing, you can see for the no-name large flake, it's 25 cents for 100 grams. The instant oatmeal is $1.11 per 100 grams. So, you know, again, from just comparing the actual amount, you can see that the top one is a much better buy. Also, from a diabetes management standpoint, generally, and a health standpoint, generally the less processed a food is, the more nutritious it's going to be for us as well. So I would again encourage everybody to begin to think about, you know, using that unit pricing to help you when you are in the grocery store comparing your foods. The last two portions of our workshop I'm going to go through fairly quickly because there's not as much information and it is contained on your handout. So thinking in your own home, how do you make the most of your food dollar at home? I would encourage everybody to take some time to do an inventory of what you have on hand. Have a basic list, and again on your handout there is an example of a pantry list. If you're like most people, oftentimes what happens is, you know, perhaps a holiday comes and maybe I make oatmeal cookies every December, and every December I buy some rolled oats, and then I haul open my pantry and I realize, oh my gosh, I still have rolled oats that I haven't used up. Oftentimes what happens at home is we spend a lot of money on our inventory and we have an overstocked pantry. So begin to think about what do you have on hand and do you actually need to buy things. So if you haven't done a pantry list, no surprise, my lady that I was referring to with that little black book, she had a lovely pantry list. That way your pantry list can help to inform you of what you need to add to your grocery list. The second piece at home to consider is the whole notion of meal planning. First off, the first step of good meal planning is to start with a piece of paper and a pen. I would encourage everybody to not plan for any more than a week because we know, generally speaking, life gets too hectic after a week and things generally don't go the way we plan them to if we plan too far in advance. So take an inventory of what you have on home, maybe have a look at your flyers, and then what you want to do is you want to start with your breakfast. See if you can figure out for 7 days what what do you normally have for breakfast? Most people have one or two different breakfasts on a general basis. Then you want to plan for your supper. The reason why you would plan for your supper next is that, generally speaking, we can use leftovers for our noontime meals. And then you want to slot in your lunchtime meals. The last thing to consider when it comes to preparing food at home is convenience versus cooking from scratch. What we know, and as you see from this slide here, cooking from scratch is always cheaper, but there is sometimes a place for not cooking from scratch. So I have an example of chicken noodle soup. We all know that making our own chicken noodle soup is definitely going to be a more nutritious, probably a more healthy thing to do. The downside is that it does take time and effort. So ask yourself, are there things that you can add to convenience foods? So can you take a can of something and add some perhaps nutritious things that you might have on hand? Do you have some carrots? Do you have some frozen vegetables that you could add to a can? Do you have some salad or kale that's wilting in your fridge that you could add? And really fortify whatever it is that you are cooking with other things. Again, on your handout there is a recipe for kicking up a can of lentil soup. So I would encourage you to check that out if you are interested. And I think this brings us to our very last poll. What is the good thing about freezing foods? And we'll see if you get this one right. My guess is you will. So, you are correct. The correct response here is both A and B. So the nice thing about freezing foods is that certainly you do cook less, generally speaking. If you're freezing things, you have to cook less often. And if we freeze things, we do have less food on hand. The downside of freezing is most of us don't have a lovely freezer that is labeled and looks as wonderful as this. So again, in keeping in our conversation about your pantry, what you want to begin to do is to think about how organized is your freezer. Are you using things before they're going perhaps freezer burnt? Are you using the older things first? Are you rotating your stock in your freezer? Do you actually even know what's in your freezer? The nice thing about a freezer, if you have one, is you can take a lot of foods maybe that you get on sale and put them in your freezer. One thing that freezes really, really well is cheese. So taking cheese and freezing it up before it begins to go moldy can work well. You can, there's an endless amount of things that you can put in your freezer. Again, the most important thing is to make sure that your freezer is organized. And this brings me to cooking in bulk. And I'm going to talk about cooking in bulk because the nice thing about cooking in bulk, or perhaps even meal swapping, is that if you have somebody close by, maybe what you can do is you can say, I can trade you a lasagna for a shepherd's pie, or I'll trade you a chili for a stew. You have to trust the person that you're doing that with, but it's a good way to cook once and maybe get a few meals out of it. The other thing that cooking in batch does is that you want to begin to think about, are there things that you can cook or prepare that you can turn into something else? And I'm going to use the example of spaghetti sauce for a minute. So imagine you start on Monday night with a spaghetti sauce, and maybe you're adventuresome enough to try some TVP in your spaghetti sauce. And then the next night you think, oh, I don't want spaghetti again. So maybe you make a lasagna, but maybe you go to perhaps the dollar store and you get a an individual or a two-person container, and you freeze some of that lasagna as well. And then you still have some spaghetti sauce left. Maybe what you do with that spaghetti sauce is you add some kidney beans and you change the spices a little bit and turn it into a chili. Then maybe the next night you cook a nice potato and you add some chili to your potato. Or maybe you take some nachos and you have some chili cheese nachos. Always begin to think about, can you cook one thing and perhaps turn it into something else? Which leads me to the whole importance of having a plan B. One of the biggest mistakes that a lot of us make when we, or where we go wrong when we're looking at our food dollar, is when things don't go as planned, what we do is we resort to takeout. So I would say, in your back pocket, maybe have some ideas in advance of things that you could whip up fairly quickly. Breakfast for supper is always a quick and easy thing to do. So think about some easy, quick plan Bs. And lastly, I want everybody to consider, what's available in your community. Do you have local food markets? Are there food centers? Are there community gardens? Are there bakery outlets? Are there meat markets? Do you have any bulk buying clubs? Are you yourself somebody who might be an avid gardener? What is available in your community to allow you to stretch your food dollar even more? And I'm going to finish with my thumbs up, thumbs down. Hopefully you've begun to appreciate that there are many advantages and disadvantages to all of the things that I spoke about this afternoon, and that you are able to do these 4 objectives. Lastly, what I would like everybody to orientate you back to is to, again, ask yourself, are you ready to make any changes? And if so, again, focus on those things that seem easy, things that you can say yes to all 4 of those questions. And ask yourself to come up with a plan. What we know about change is that if you do not set a specific plan, the likelihood of actually implementing that plan is slim to none. So I'm going to show you one example here of a goal that you might take from something like this. And if anybody is interested, I noticed on one of your webinars there's some archived on goal setting. So goals that are written for success are done a certain way. And here's an example of one. I will check the unit pricing when I buy cereal to make sure that I am getting the best deal when it comes to buying my cereal. So I'm going to call it quits here and open it up for questions. I know we're kind of almost to the end of our time, but hopefully we'll have some time for a couple of questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Jacqueline. You've definitely provided us with some very concrete information and tips on how to stay financially healthy and as well as eating well with diabetes. So thank you so much for that. I do want to make a quick reference to the resource guide, which is located to the bottom of your screen. Jacqueline was speaking to one of the handouts earlier. That is the second reference there located in the resource section. So please feel free to download the reference, as well as there's a couple different other resources there provided to you on behalf of Diabetes Canada. So please be sure to check those out as they all relate to eating well with diabetes. So with that being said, we will take a couple questions. I know we're at the end of the hour here, so for the folks that have a couple more minutes, please stay with us because I'd like to get your questions answered. For the ones that we do not get to, please email us at webinars@diabetes.ca, and we will be sure to follow up with you. So Jacqueline, our first question here. One of our participants has said, as a single person, I find quantity a challenge. Recipes are for larger amounts, and it's easy to get tired or bored of eating the same thing over it again. Is there a resource you might recommend that contains interesting recipes, single serving sizes?
The best recipe or the best resource that comes to mind right now is, I believe there's actually a diabetes cookbook that is geared towards cooking for smaller households. The other thing that you can do, and I'm not sure how I could get that to somebody, maybe you might know, Farah, is even taking your recipes and reducing things by half. There's all kinds of easy, quick conversions that you can do to make half of a recipe to maybe make a third of a recipe. That being said, I think this is where freezing can come really handy. You know, if you're cooking for one or two or cooking for a smaller household, you know, maybe cook it in a usual amount, but portion some things that you can put in your freezer almost as, you know, your homemade TV dinners that you can take out on another evening that perhaps you don't want to have to cook something.
Great, thank you so much for that, Jacqueline. Our next question here, our next participant has asked, is unit pricing always listed for all foods? And is it available at all stores? If not, is this something I can calculate on my own?
Oh, what a great question. So unit pricing is generally available in most larger stores. So most grocery stores will have it. You can absolutely calculate it yourself. If you have a smartphone or a calculator, what you'd want to do is you'd want to take the price of your item and divide it by the volume or weight. So for instance, if you had a 1,000 ml container of something, and let's say it was $2, you'd take $2 and divide that by 1,000, and that would tell you the price of that per mil. And you can do that for Kleenex, you could do that for paper towel, you could do that for just about anything. All you'd need to know would be the weight or volume of your item and what the total cost is. And then you could compare something yourself.
Great. Thank you so much for that explanation, Jacqueline. Our next question here is a bit of a two-part. What is the best way to avoid freezer burns when freezing leftovers? And is there danger in eating something that might be or have a freezer burn?
Great question. So best way to avoid freezer burn things is to use things up in a timely manner. That being said, it's generally the air that causes something to be freezer burned. So the more tightly you can seal something, the better off. So if you're freezing meat, for instance, the recommendation is to actually freeze it in the package that it comes in. If you are halving it, I would, if you have some kitchen scissors, cut it in half, maybe put it in a Ziploc bag and then wrap some tin foil around it, or get some good freezer lock bags and try to get as much air as possible out of something. So that's kind of step one. Step two with freezer things that are freezer burnt. Generally, there's no harm in eating something that's freezer burnt. What's going to be compromised is generally the texture or the quality of the food. So for instance, if you're eating freezer burnt chicken, it's going to be a little rubbery or a little more chewy than if it wasn't freezer burnt. But there is no danger in eating freezer burnt food.
Great. Once again, thank you so much for that explanation, Jacqueline. And folks, that does conclude our webinar for today. Again, for the questions we didn't get to, please email us at webinars@diabetes.ca and we will be sure to get back to you. I'd sincerely like to thank Jacqueline for speaking on behalf of Diabetes Canada. It's been a great learning experience. Do want to remind everyone that today's webinar was recorded and will be made available in the coming weeks on our Diabetes Canada website. Diabetes Canada has hosted over 35 webinars, which are all available for you to watch from the comfort of your own home. So our topics range from financial assistance to healthy living to medication management. To get a listing of these and to view these, please visit diabetes.ca/webinars and click on the Past Webinars tab to access these immediately. Please note that we will be also hosting our next series of webinars coming up in September, so please stay tuned and visit our website for information as registration opens up. For those of you living with type 1 and are located in Vancouver, please be sure to visit our website, diabetes.ca/expo, for the upcoming Type 1 Diabetes Canada Expo. If you'd like some more information, it is located at the Nest on the UBC campus and will be hosted from 8 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. on Saturday, September the 30th. So once again, for some more information and to register, please visit www.diabetes.ca/expo. And for those of you looking for some more support and resources to live well with diabetes, please feel free to call our toll-free line at 1-800-BANTING. That's 1-800-226-8464. We thank you for joining us today. We hope you've enjoyed learning with Diabetes Canada, and we look forward to your participation in the future.